Are you finding it a chore to have to chase clients to work out whether they're ready to move forward with a proposal? Are you sick of people ghosting you and disappearing after you've given them what you thought was a successful pitch? Well, today on this episode, we're going to talk about the old version of pitching and proposing that still a lot of consultants are using today, and how not only is that losing them money, but it means that they're not getting the value that they should be getting from every consulting engagement. We're going to show you what to do instead and how the new model of consulting is going to enable you to get more value and more profits in your consulting business.
I will never be the same, 'cause that's what it takes.
Hi, my name is Russell Pearson and welcome to Your Consulting Business Podcast, episode 136. For over 30 years now, I've been involved in some form of consulting, whether that be as a marketing consultant or as a business consultant. And for the last 20 years, I've been running this business that has changed from really being an agency model through to being what we now call a select consultancy. The difference being an agency is where you pitch and propose for work, where you become the service provider, where on the other hand we have the select consulting business model where you are the advisor and or the mentor. And the difference between those two worlds is completely different in how you deliver your results. You see, in the service model, it's a done for you model, which means that you as a service provider will provide a service and usually do the work for the client. Where in the advisory model, the difference being you can't do the work for the client because therefore you're not advising, you're actually doing, and then moving back down into that service provider position. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a service provider, but if you're wanting to give advice as the valuable part of the sale that you want to make, then you need to be positioned in a way that it's not your job to do the work. So how do we go about doing that? Well, a large part of it is how we engage someone from the very start of the conversation. So let's look at the pitch and propose model. So to have a look at the pitch and propose model, I need to go back in time and actually talk about how sales has changed over the last 3 decades. You see, back in the 90s, what everyone was talking about was a solution. If you weren't a solution provider, if you didn't have a solution, then you were nobody. And if you can remember back to those days, you knew that everyone was very impressed with their own solution that they had created. Because if you could create this packaged and perfect solution, you could present it to the client, and back then they would be able to say yes to it because they hadn't seen anything like it before. But by the time we got through to the noughties, which was a terrible name for a time, but let's say past the 2000s, people became much more sophisticated in the way that they would buy. And a large part of that is because of the internet, right? They had access to many more sources of information, which means they had access to more options. They could find information about the options they needed to solve their problems. And so that's where they started to compare the different solutions, and that's where features and benefits started to really rise. There were people who were trying to go back to the 80s, which is even before that solution phase, where it was all sizzle, sell the sizzle, not the steak, sell the good night's sleep, not the pillow. But it was much more difficult because people were more discerning. They were able to compare different models against one another. And so features and benefits became the way people sold. And funnily enough, people still sell that way today. And I think it's just because they got used to it and they thought that it was the same way of selling no matter how the times have changed. But in actual fact, as environments change, we need to adapt with them, which means we need to adapt the way we market. It means we need to adapt the way we sell and the way we help people make decisions, which is going to come up again in the very near future. So let's talk about that process. So they get into features and benefits. We now start measuring ourselves against other solutions and products out there in the market. By the time we get to 2010, people don't really care about the vehicle, the solution, the feature or the benefit. They just start to really care about the result. What result am I getting from the service that I'm engaging? And this is where we get into the space of outcomes. This is where the world of outcomes starts to really thrive. We start really having a look at value-based selling, which was kind of already been around for a long period of time, but not many people were doing it, understanding what is the value and quantifying that value of whatever the result is that we're getting for people. So we're now at this place where outcomes are the only real thing that matters. And the only thing other than that is how those outcomes are generated, not the vehicle, not the what of getting us to the outcome, but whether we want the outcome to be faster or easier or lower risk. These are hows, these are preferences on the outcome. And so the old model of selling, which is to come in, pitch and propose, will have a two-step process. We come in, we do a discovery call, which means that we come in and we ask a series of questions of the prospect. We then leave the prospect, go away and try and guess at what they're going to say yes to, which is what we do. We come in and we pitch. Now, we used to do that type of model. And in doing that, we're saying this is what we're going to do. But the difference in the model is when you're pitching, when you're proposing, you are instantly putting yourself in the position of service provider. You're pitching and proposing to say, please, we think this is what you want. Will you decide to go with us? Where the other model, the more successful model, the more modern model, is a medical practitioner model. It is the model of you being the doctor. We invite people to come and speak to us when they have challenges. We ask them about the symptomatic issues they're experiencing, and we ask them if they would want the opposite instead, which is an outcome. Then if they say yes, then we help them diagnose the challenge and we help them create the prescription that they're very happy to move forward with. We don't do it alone. So we don't go away alone, come up with a pitch and present it. We certainly don't send a proposal and hope that they're going to say yes, especially when we're not in the room. A much easier model is to be there with the client, designing with them to create a thing that they really want. So, number one, there are 4 different aspects that you need to be aware of. The main ones are the old model, and this is what we want to avoid. There is a problem and there is a solution. The problem is the cause that underlies the challenge that the client or prospect is experiencing. The solution is the vehicle to help them get to an outcome, which means these are the 2 pieces stuck in the middle. Now, on the side of the problem, we've got a symptom, which is the problem that the prospect is aware of. They're not aware of the cause. They're most likely not aware of the cause because it's underlying the issue. They're aware of the symptomatic problem that they're experiencing because it is visible, right? They can feel it, they can see it, they can touch it, they can experience it. Now, they just want the opposite of that symptom. So I have a pain in my leg. I want to be pain-free. This is the outcome. I have problems hiring good talent. The outcome is I want to be able to easily hire good talent. Yeah? And so really what we want to do is get rid of the pieces in the middle. We don't want to talk about the causes. We don't want to talk about the solution. And we want to talk about the symptom that people are experiencing, and we want them to buy into the outcome. Now, it's easy for people to buy into the outcome because it's the opposite of the symptom they're already aware of, so they tell us what they want, and it's always the opposite of that symptom. And so, how do we go about doing that? Well, first off, all we need to do is identify, do they want that symptom to go away? If they want that symptom to go away, they've tried other things, they're ready to try something with us, they want it to go away, it's a priority to do that now. In other words, if it's not a priority to do this, it's like a nice to have, then now is not the time to do the diagnostic. If you're the doctor and someone comes in and they say, I've got a pain in my leg, how bad's the pain? It's kind of like a 1, right? Well, have some bed rest and go and have some good nutrition and go and deal with it yourself. They come in, they've got a pain in my leg. How bad is that pain? Oh, it's an 8 or a 9. Well, I assume you'd like to get rid of that pain. Yes, I would, please. Can you please help me? All right. There is a demand, there is a desire, there is a need, there is a priority to remove the issue now. Now, if there is a priority, that's when we move to design, and that's when we help people design a way forward. Now, I've had a little bit of pushback on this model, which is, well, we have to send a proposal. And in some cases, you will send something that we're agreeing to, but the difference between sending a proposal where it's part of the sale, where you send them a document to make a decision around, versus talking them through the design and actually making the decision together, completely changes the way your conversion rates run. If you're trying to actually get people to decide on what you've got on a written document without you in the room, they're probably looking at your document, they're looking at 2 other documents, and they're just deciding on the features and benefits in front of you. If you are there helping people diagnose the problem with them, not only are you setting yourself up as the mentor and advisor, but you're able to be there to help them with the challenges, the obstacles, and the objections that may come up in their mind to make that decision. And so designing with that person is the golden key. Now, instead of sending a proposal, there's two models that we want to look at. Number one is, can this person make the buying decision themselves? And usually that is a solo business person, or maybe it's an individual who's actually receiving your advice or whatever it might be, but they're paying for it themselves. With that person, you'll just ask them if they would like to move ahead. After you've designed the thing, you've got a price, you've got something that they can say yes to, and then you will tell them what are the steps that need to be done to move ahead with that idea. Now, usually that's we set up the date for the first engagement, we take a deposit, and we have this one-page agreement which we both agree to, right? This is just about how we do things around here, which is an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, is a very simple way to do just that. Now, if we've got someone who's making a decision on the behalf of an organization, and the organization needs to approve this, large corporate, other organizations like that, there may be a procurement process. Now, within the procurement process, you might think that you know what needs to be done, but every organization is a little bit different. So if you know that there's an organization behind it, I would say, would you like to go ahead? They say yes. Then I would ask them, what do we need to do to get this across the line? What do we need to do to get this in your organization? Now, in asking that, what we do is we uncover what are the next steps. I've seen so many consultants make the mistake of, when someone says they want to go ahead, saying, well, I'll send you a proposal, and if you can agree to that, that'd be fantastic. That actually means that they're off on their own, making the decision without you. Instead, ask them what are the steps that they need to move ahead. And the majority of cases I've experienced, and now many of my clients have experienced because they've decided to stop doing proposals, is that they find out that all they needed to send was a simple email so a purchase order could be raised. Or they needed to send an invoice so they could put it through legal. Or whatever the steps might be. But again, they're different for every organization. So if you know what the steps are, then you're able to track, is there an easier way for us to get this across the line? Because I've worked with so many businesses where they've said, well, the first thing is we're going to need to see a proposal. I would then say, okay, what sort of proposal would you need to see? And sometimes they've even said it's just 3 lines on an email so that we can raise the next step. And then I will ask them, what are the steps to get all the way through so we can start the engagement? By having that conversation with them, sometimes I'm able to actually say, well, if we did this instead, we would actually avoid those other 3 steps. Would that be easier for you? And in so many cases, they've gone, that's a great idea, let's do that. It's going to enable us to get over the tripwires and avoid the lasers of the procurement department, right? And so you don't need to offer a proposal. Please never do that. Never send what I call a lonely proposal, which is a proposal that goes without you. If they want to see a written proposal before they make a decision, make sure that you've created a meeting so you can walk them through a proposal so you can answer their questions. Yes, people will often say to you, let me think about it. But if you are there with them, you can actually uncover what it is they want to think about and have the conversation with them. If you're in a situation where they're actually looking at you as a service provider rather than an advisor, you've already missed certain steps, and you're always going to find it a hard process to work through when you're there working with the client. They're going to start asking you for things that are scope creep. They're going to ask you to do things to make the project work, when really your role is to advise about strategically how to do the project, or what steps need to be done to maybe overview a project. As soon as you start getting involved in the doing of things, you find yourself as becoming a cog in the machine of this solution working, which means that it'll only work with you involved in it. If you are coming in as a mentor, if you're coming in as an advisor, we're trying to enable the organization or enable the client to achieve a result through our advice, but not through our intervention. Right? So that's what we're trying to avoid. So if you come in on a pitch and a proposal, you'll almost always come into the production side of a business. If you come in from the advice and the mentorship side, you'll come in the strategic business. Now imagine that there is a house with 2 rooms. There are doorways, one going into the production side of things, the other one coming into the strategy side of things. If you come in from the production side, you don't get allowed to go into the strategy room. But if you come through the strategy room, you are allowed to go into the production room. But I will just warn you that once you're in the production room, sometimes you can get stuck there, because sometimes production is easy money. Sometimes production is bigger money. And in doing that, sometimes you can paint yourself into a corner where you find, I'm only able to service 3, maybe 4 clients, when in actual fact I want a business that's more agile than that, so I'm not stuck with the potential of actually losing 33% of my entire income in a single client. So there's all sorts of reasons not to pitch and propose, but the main reason is to position yourself as the advisor and a mentor and to work with a client to actually design the way forward rather than trying to do it without them. So I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a prospect ghosting you, disappearing after you've sent them a proposal? Have you ever done a pitch and you thought it went pretty good and they said, let me think about it, and then you've been chasing them for 6 to 18 months? Right? This is normal when you're doing the old model of consulting. And the reason I'm bringing this up right now is because in the Consulting Guild and the Forge Business Program, we are doubling down on the human side of conversational selling. And there's a big reason for that, because the environment is moving once again. We're no longer in just the internet environment. We're no longer in just the environment of outcomes. Now we're in this artificially intelligent and enabled environment where it becomes easier for consultants to create automated, generated pitches and proposals, which means that there is a trap that you could fall into. Because it's easy to do, you're going to potentially opt for the easy version. Now, what's interesting about the easy version is it's not as good as the hard version that took you a lot of time and effort to put in, which means conversion rates will drop even further. And you're going to miss out on the opportunity to be the advisor and the mentor during the engagement, which means, unfortunately, those people who opt for the artificial intelligent way of proposing and pitching means that they're going to be productized even further down below service provider to commodity. And so if you don't want to be moved into the position of commodity, the contractor that's been brought in to do a job as an employee, then it is much more effective to get good and practiced at the conversational art of not only selling, but helping clients make decisions. Learning to design with a client so that you can help them take next steps. Because what's key about that is that artificial intelligence, even the internet right now, can pretty much give you most of the answers that you're looking for in just about any problem that you want to solve. But it's helping humans make decisions and take steps that is going to be the art that's the most valuable across the next 10 years. And so learning to have conversations, learning to do diagnostic with a client to help them take steps into a yes on a sale is exactly the same method as helping them take steps and saying yes to steps in the engagement. And so getting good at one means you get good at the other. The lazier you become around proposals and pitches and opting for that old model of selling, then the harder work it's going to be when you're actually in there trying to be an advisor and trying to be a mentor, and they're just continually trying to pigeonhole you into a contractor role. You know, we have all sorts of resources for consultants who are building their business just like you. And if you can go to russellpearsonprograms.com, you can download free resources we've got available right there and now. But we have a lot of additional resources in a thing we call the Consulting Guild. Now, this is a community, an educational community that enables you as a consultant to learn some of these methods and some of these models and some of these frameworks to enable you to be more effective in your consulting practice. Now, both in the marketing aspect, the sales aspect, and the delivery of what you do day to day as a consultant. If you're interested to know more about that, go to theconsultingguild.com and you can put in an expression of interest. We'll send you all the details about how to join that community. My name's Russell Pearson. This is Your Consulting Business Podcast, episode 136. Until next time, stay passionate, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.